Fei-fei Li from Stanford is on to something. For some of you that don't know who Feifei Li is, she is a co-director of the Stanford Natural Language Computing Lab and a computer scientist, often regarded as the godmother of AI. And she had a really interesting take on not just AI, but on the public sector in the United States and schools in particular not really having the same kind of compute resources or even close to the same compute resources as industry does. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. I'll share mine. This take really inspired me, and I think she's got a point here. Let's take a look at this, and then we'll talk about it.
With President Biden, one of the things we talked about is the moonshot mentality to invest in public sector AI because, you know, we're here in the heart of Silicon Valley. It's not a secret that all the resources, both in terms of talent, data, and compute, are concentrated in industry, actually in big tech industry. And Americans' public sector academia is falling off the cliff pretty fast in terms of AI resource. Stanford Natural Language Processing Lab has 64 GPUs. 64. Think about the contrast. And so we talk about resourcing public sector because that is the innovation engine of our country. It produces public goods, it produces scientific discoveries, and it produces trustworthy, responsible evaluation and explanation of this technology for the public.
So that was a brilliant take, and I don't know if a lot of people talk about this enough, because most my contacts are in the industry. The conferences I go to are a lot of industry conferences from people who don't really teach, so they don't see firsthand some of these issues. They only hear about them, and I'm teaching in it. And I believe one of my callings is to go in and change some of these schools I go to become more forward thinking, more progressive, and up to date when it comes to teaching IT and cybersecurity in particular. And she mentions, that Stanford only has 64 GPUs for their natural language lab. And it makes me think about the school environments I've gone into that are 10 years old. You walk into a lab and you're seeing monitors that connect to PCs that are VGA cables. You're seeing old hardware, and you come across systems that aren't in institutions that aren't so excited about really getting the latest and greatest technology because it's just not required. And I'm not typically one to rant here on YouTube or Twitch, but this really inspires a rant from me because it strikes a chord that I'm really passionate about, and that is I happen to believe that colleges in the United States, even community colleges, which if you don't know what a community college is, it's largely seen as a 2-year institution. Most schools come to them so that they can, most students come to the school so that they can eventually transfer to a university. But then there's also programs that are more career and technical education focused, which is things to get people out there in the working world. You see people doing nursing, you see people learning IT, networking, programming, cybersecurity, and they can get jobs without that 4-year degree, or at least get a job in the industry before they go and continue with their 4-year degree. And, they can do a lot of public good, especially if they had the latest technology. I mean, these schools are largely subsidized by taxpayer dollars in your local states and their local communities. And, it makes me wonder, where's the money going? I know there's lots of money that come into these schools to keep them going, to pay for faculty and staff salaries, and to keep the institution's facilities running. But there has to be some money to get ahead of the curve. And listening to Feifei Li in that, it makes me wonder, as educators and as institutions, why is it that we can't invest in modernizing technology resources that students have access to, and then even perhaps trying to build more innovation, right? I mean, like trying to lead the way a little bit in a similar way that a startup would. I know there's venture capital that goes into startups and lots of money, but I've seen community colleges get multiple millions of dollars in funding for projects. So it's why couldn't we do that? And I think part of it is a lot of the community colleges, at least, they don't see themselves that way. They almost have a lower viewpoint of themselves. Like, oh, we can't do that. We're just a community college. But, having worked in community colleges before and doing innovative things in the lab, breaking through in some areas, I've seen that the potential is there. The system can do it. There's money that flows through, grants out there that can subsidize becoming a more innovative environment and perhaps even leading the curve. I don't know if it should be so dependent on waiting on the industry to do it first. Why can't schools and educational institutions be leading the way? Let me know your thoughts on that, especially if you're an educator, but even if you're a student and you have an interest in education. What do you think below? Can universities and even community colleges, with the right focus, become leading innovators?